want to begin the 11 o'clock session?
Okay, we are now live and recording.
Okay, we're ready to go.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome to today's School Safety Advisory Board meeting. It is 11 a.m. Therefore, I will call this meeting to order. Please confirm that the meeting once again is live streaming and recorded.
The meeting is live streaming and recorded.
Thank you. We will now begin with the roll call of our board members. Let's begin with that process if we could. Are we going to share the screen there?
Yes, I am. Just slight technical challenge. Give me half.
Okay.
Can you see it yet?
I cannot.
Slides are up, Kate.
Slides are up. Okay. And we are ready to go through the slides, correct? Are they up now? Okay, good. Once again, good morning. I'm Dr. Michael Martirano, Chair, and let's begin the roll call. Catherine Klausmeyer. Are you with us?
Oh, Senator's actually out of town right now. My name is Sam Dation. I'm her legislative director.
Thank
Here,
you.
Herbie.
Eric Ebersol, are you present? Moving on to the next slide. Karen Bailey, I know that you're here, but are you here?
I'm here. Yes, thank you.
Dr. Kelly Anderson,
Here.
Pamela Gaddy, Lourdes Padilla. Moving to the next slide. Andrew Tress. Laurel Moody.
Good morning here.
Thank you. Good morning. Claire Cabral.
Here.
Good morning, Claire.
Good morning.
Dr. Tia McKinnon.
Here.
Welcome, Dr. McKinnon.
Thank you.
Sheriff Matthew Crisafulli.
Here, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chief Paul Kiefer.
Here, sir.
David Engel. Detective Lawrence E. Smith. Next slide, please. Dr. Sharon A. Hoover.
Present. Good morning.
Good morning. Megan Berger.
Present.
Good morning to you. Scott Tiffin. Michael Brown.
Present.
Thank you, Michael. Moving to the next slide. James T. Bell.
Present.
Mr. Bell, good morning.
Morning to you.
Patrick D. Herring. Thomas E. Alban.
Present.
Thank you. Good morning to you. Manfred Reek. Lee Nadine Oppenheim.
Present. Good morning.
Good morning. Next slide. I believe that is everyone. Can we please determine if we have a quorum?
We do have a quorum.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Dunklow. Is that you on that I heard?
It is, yes, and I'll be standing in for Dawn Ludke. She's moved out of state service, and so I'll be covering the board until a replacement counsel is hired.
Thank you and welcome. Once again, board members, it's good to to see you in, although it, albeit virtual. As you remember, the last meeting of the advisory board was in November, and the November meeting was recorded, and the recording is available on the MCSS website. As such, there are no meeting minutes to be approved. Let's move on to the agenda. Are there any additions to today's agenda? Hearing none, there are no additions to the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
This is Tom, so moved.
Thank you, Tom. Do we have a second?
This is Sharon, second.
Sharon, thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion passes. The agenda for today is approved. Now let us move into the next area on our agenda. I know if you had the same experience that we just had in our work group, we needed more time, and we had a very robust discussion. For the last hour, members of the board have been working in those 3 separate work groups discussing the 3 items. The meetings were recorded and will be made available following today's meeting. I will ask each designated work group lead to provide an update on their discussion and the work group's next steps. As we hear from each group, I encourage members of the board to ask questions and identify any concerns and provide any comments to each work group. Let's start with recommendation 3.1, identifying the behaviors of concern. Who was the lead in that particular group?
So Kim is the lead from MCSS, but I was asked to report out from the work group. Kim, did you need to make any contextualizing remarks?
No, I think we got through sort of 1 and 2. Dr. Hoover has some feedback she would like from the group. And then I'm also prepared to put in the chat box the one proposal you may speak to.
Great. So you can see there the recommendation, and our work group spent time first on just thinking about definitions, and a couple of areas we focused on specifically were within the recommendation and then the observation statement. So the observation statement includes language around creating a culture of civility in schools. So we spent some time attempting to define that. And then the actual recommendation includes the term behaviors of concern. And we had discussion around and there seemed to be consensus around adjusting that language because that language has specific meaning within the law, related to it essentially being kind of the precursor to a threat assessment. And we understood our charge or the recommendation to be broader than that. So we were kind of thinking of language that might reflect educational materials to support the stakeholders that are mentioned here on how to promote pro-social behaviors and decrease maladaptive behaviors. So one of the questions to the broader group was, are we collectively okay with the idea of replacing behaviors of concern with something akin to both promoting pro-social behaviors in school and decreasing maladaptive behaviors, recognizing that we would then need to define those as well. So those were the primary things that we spent our time on as a work group. And I invite others from the work group to chime in.
Thank you. I am curious, these resources should incorporate the student voice. How was that discussed?
So thank you. We did discuss that. There was both an interest in engaging young people in the actual discussion and really in the co-development process, but there was some uncertainty about how we could effectively do that within the process that's currently happening. So work groups during the school day, how can we ensure that we actually do have student voice? So we didn't land on a decision about how to do this. We just all seemed to come to consensus that it was very important to do.
Very good. I think that we need to remember that the individuals affected by this the most are our students and our staff, and how we think about ways to reduce anxiety as we are addressing these. I constantly hear from our student body about that. That's excellent. Anything else from your particular group that we'd like to lift up? It's a nice summary. Thank you very much. Let's move on to recommendation 6.1, threats and swatting. Who's going to represent that particular group? Ron?
We didn't actually decide that, but I was hoping one of the group might volunteer to talk about some of the things we discussed while we were together. So I'll take volunteers, since I know you all like to talk.
Chief Kiefer, I see you right on the screen. You're anxious to talk.
Thanks for letting me be voluntold on this one, Doctor. So our work group was working on their unrealistic expectations regarding what law enforcement and educators can do in response to social media threats or posts as the work group. So we had a lively discussion about the differences between all the jurisdictions and the responses, the definitions that different school systems use regarding things like lockdowns and those kind of terminologies as some barriers that we needed to kind of overcome within the work group. And what we really boiled it down to was coming up with, there was some discussion about guidance as being a problem word and maybe protocol being developed into there. So I think we didn't really define which way we wanted to go there, other than to kind of come up with a protocol that's broad across all school systems, whether small or large, that would work within the framework of that specific school district and how they handle school threats to the specifics of their school threats. So one of the things we looked at was getting ahead of that social media craze that goes out there when some of these things hit that platform, whether real or not. So putting a protocol out that basically says that once a school receives a threat, either directly or indirectly through law enforcement or other means, that they will instantly communicate with the local law enforcement agency responsible for that school safety, and an investigation will begin. Joint investigation partnering with that local law enforcement agency, and then a notification will go out to the community if necessary, based on the threat, the level of that threat, and that notification will be to explain that that's what's happening, that they received a threat, that we are investigating it with local law enforcement, and that the safety of the students and the staff are paramount, and we're working to determine the response to this threat in conjunction with law enforcement. And then any actions taken as a result of that threat will be based on the intelligence and the investigation in cooperation with local law enforcement to follow up with any kind of outcome from that, whether it's was deemed to be not valid, or if it was valid, if charges had been filed against anyone without going into specifics who that student might be, if it's a student, and working through that to get ahead of. So the protocol is basically to try to get ahead of that social media fervor that we can't control as soon as possible, but that information just kind of going down a protocol. So I'll encourage anybody else from our group to step in and clarify anything I've brought up.
That was excellent. Ms. Bailey, could you add some more information from the group regarding the audience of who we were talking to and the need for communications with our community?
Yes, so we decided, or I guess toward the end, that our deliverable needs to be directed to the parents within the community. They're usually the ones that are fueling it on social media, or their children are, and there's just that, there's that angst of, what's happening in my child's school? Do I need to run and pick them up right now? So we are trying to make sure that whatever protocols or guidance we set out, that, that there's very clear step-off points for the parents to be notified or updated as to what is going on. I made the point, I don't know if the group agreed, but maybe to not go so far as to determine, if X, Y, and Z happens, then we lock down, right? Because each case is going to be different, and we don't want to pigeonhole anything and kind of put ourselves into a box that, if we end up not locking down a school, then we have, follow-up questions later, just because the investigation is always going to be so fluid.
Yes, well said. Thank you. Anybody else from the particular group want to say anything? Still much work to be done. Good conversation. Let's move on to the next work group. Recommendation 9.1, inaccurate information. Who is identified as the spokesperson for this group?
We're both going to speak. I'll start off. The biggest thing we were looking at were trigger terms. When we look at things like need to address or inaccurate, dilute effective communication, inflamed tensions, we were looking at terms that as a public, if I'm reading those are the terms I'm kind of stuck on. And we need to do a better job defining those terms as far as making sure that they know that we're being more progressive instead of being, putting a Band-Aid on the situation. We want to be more progressive about getting the information out before in more of a timely fashion.
So such as the inclusion of a word such as proactive and defining inaccurate information as potentially being incomplete information. Just making sure that the wording we have is accessible to everyone and we're clearly conveying our point across in what we mean by inaccurate information and how we're effectively communicating with the community. But beyond that, we also discussed the specific groups that are being impacted: students, parents, staff, the community. I think a big thing we talked about was if an event occurs in a school, it's not just the school that's impacted, it's all the schools around it. It's the entire community. I know, speaking from experience as a student, something that happens potentially at a school in my county on the other side away from me, I'm hearing that information that potentially may be inaccurate. So just ensuring that the entire community is being addressed in this. Also remembering the audience, the students, the parents. We talked about how students are receiving a lot of their information through social media platforms such as Instagram, while as parents may be consistently checking their emails or using Facebook. So just keeping in mind when information is being shared and trying to make sure accurate information is being shared, those platforms and those differences are kept in mind. And then I think another thing we talked about as well was just making sure that if information cannot be shared at the time, so if there's an ongoing investigation, just communicating with a simple statement on social media or through email or through a trusted person in the community, just that there is an ongoing investigation, no information can be shared at this time, because we said something is better than nothing. People are still going to find out that something is occurring. So just ensuring there's some sort of proactive communication if an event occurs, regardless of if information can be shared or not, will help quell the spread of that misinformation.
Claire, that is extremely well said, and we've had those conversations at the local level. Just let people know something is happening is very important to our community as the evolution of the event occurs, so that we can continue that information. Did you speak specifically about ways that we could enhance our communications to students?
So I think we definitely specifically said just keeping in mind the platforms that students are using, such as Instagram being a primary one. We also talked about building trust in the community as well. If trust isn't established there first, then when communication does go out, students and parents and stakeholders may not trust that information that's occurring. So I think that's something we're going to continue to talk about in our discussions moving forward. But our initial conversation today was focused on that initial social media breach and where students are communicating, because that's definitely the main one where people are getting their information.
I appreciate. Go ahead.
I was going to say, when we discuss inflamed tensions, sometimes that comes not from the incident that happened, but it might be from incidents that happened before. So we're talking about getting positive information out as well as negative information. If the only time the school hears from you is when something bad happens, then that's what they expect. So we want the school to trust that when we do put information out, that we will handle the information We will handle the incident and resolve it in a timely fashion. You can trust that we're going to take care of everybody and that everybody's voice will be heard before we make a decision.
Thank you. Well said on both of those. And I like the fact the word that you chose to, both of you use, was trust. Individuals need to feel that trust. At the same time, did you spend any time identifying when we're talking about trust, how to quickly identify and address inaccurate information, about encouraging and empowering parents and students to proactively let us know things are happening as well? Did you have discussions around that? That may have been a little bit more broad.
I think that was something we touched on at the end. We kind of ran out of time because we were talking about all these great things. But again, I think that's something we're definitely going to work to address in our solutions and our further discussions around this recommendation.
Many of the school systems have adopted the philosophy of see something, say something, hear something, say something. Those pieces become critical in helping us identify clear and accurate and factual information. So thank you. Anybody else from group 9.1? Anything else you would like to say? Thank you.
It was just the two of us.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, that was very robust then. Thank you, but did a very nice job. Thank you very, very much. Sounds like all the groups had an extremely productive discussion, and we're looking forward to the ongoing work around these very important topics. And I can quickly see the interwoven themes between all three of them as we're working towards this common goal of addressing the concerns identified in the recommendations. Next week, the board will receive copies of all the work group notes with the purpose of allowing you the opportunity to provide any follow-up comments or thoughts you have on the recommendations. These comments will be shared with the work groups in preparation for our next meeting. Now, moving on with our agenda, I'm now looking at additional board updates. I will open up the meeting to any updates from the board on important projects, discussion items, or new resources that you would like to share with the group. Kate, I don't have access to seeing everybody on the screen, so I'm just gonna ask board members, if you have something, please sort of jump in or raise your hand and we'll identify you there. Do I see anybody who would like to jump in and share some information with the board?
I don't see any hands.
Very quiet today, board members. Okay, well, thank you for your continued commitment to the safety of our schools and of our students. Let me just let you know a couple things as we foreshadow the future here. There is no meeting scheduled in January. The next subcabinet meeting will be held virtual on February 6th. So I wish you all a wonderful holiday season, to be safe. And at this moment, do I have a motion to adjourn?
This is Tom, so moved.
Thank you, Tom. Do we have a second?
This is Laurel, second.
Second.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, Laurel. Sorry, Laurel.
You can have it.
Who was that? Of Laurel? Okay, we have a second from Laurel. Okay, we got that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed to adjourning? Hearing no one, thank you. And as I stated, have a wonderful rest of the year. And one more shout out to the staff. You're doing an outstanding job. Thank you for all your support, everyone. Have a great day.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.